Welcome to this session on risk management in projects. In this session, we'll be learning about the concept of risk and how it is relevant to a project. Now, to begin with, what risk means. Risk basically refers to the variability or uncertainty which might prevail in a project. Risk is inherent in almost every business decision. So a project has a typical beginning and an end, and in the intervening phase. So a project life cycle, as you all know, consists of the various phases of conceptualization, planning, execution, and termination. So it is spread over a specific period of time, and in between this period, uncertainties might creep in. So typically you would be requiring various resources, maybe man, material, money, and all, and they are bound to get uncertainty because of several reasons, maybe internal or external. So variability or uncertainty is prevalent in almost all business decisions, and more so in projects. Specifically, if we talk about the capital budgeting decisions, so we are assessing the costs and benefits that are extended over a long period of time, and during this long period many things or situations or environment or scenario can change. So this change can be unanticipated ways, and hence the risk might creep in because of these. Now, risk and risk management is a complex and multifaceted phenomena, and there are some measures which are adopted to capture the different facets of risk. Some of these prominent measures are like the range, which is the difference between the highest and the lowest value, the standard deviation, which is represented by the symbol sigma, and it is the most commonly used measure. We have another measure called the coefficient of variation, which is the ratio of mean to standard deviation, that is mu divided by sigma. Then there is another measure called semi-variance. We'll see or we'll get a better understanding about all these measures in the subsequent slides through an example. Now, different projects involve risk to different extents. Means each project is unique and is characterized by its own characteristics in terms of time requirement, money, resources, and so on and so forth. So each project is unique in its own way, and hence the involved risks are also varied when associated with different projects. So if we take an example of a research and development project, then it is considered to be more risky compared to an expansion project. So, and this expansion project is considered to be in general more risky than a replacement project. So if you have a manufacturing setup, a plant, and you are going for an maybe expansion plan for that project, then that is considered to be more risky in comparison to if you go for some replacement of some machinery in your manufacturing setup. Similarly, if you undertake research and development, so what new in how much time, there is a lot of uncertainty involved that as to it might take, how much time it might take. So there is that is considered to be a more risky project compared to others like an expansion project. Now, there are many sources because of which risk may arise, though they are categorized like into some categories, different categories. One is the project specific risk, and this is when the earnings of the project may be lower than expected because of estimations done. There are errors in estimations which you have done. So you typically might have forecasted demand, so it is based on some modeling, and there is some estimation errors associated with that modeling. So because of that, um, the earnings of the project might be lower than expected. If your quality of management of a project is also not or it also impacts the quality of management, also impacts the level of earnings. So these kind of risks are categorized as project specific risks. Now there is another risk which is called the competitive risk, and as the name suggests, it is dealing with the unanticipated risk because of actions of competitors. So your competitors in a market might initiate some actions which pose a competitive risk to you. For example, when Jio launched its new plans, it was unanticipated by its competitors. So all major telecom players were taken aback uh, and had to face uncertainty, and quite a few had to merge, or quite a few also um, are non-existent. So your competitive risk also is quite important. Then there are some industry specific risk which are primarily because of unexpected technological developments or regulatory changes which are specific to an industry. And if your project belongs to such an industry, then it is prone to this industry specific risk. So if some new technology comes in, and that transforms the market, so you will have to you might have to undergo uh, a replacement of replacement or upgradation of the old technology to the new technology, and this involves elements of risks. So you might not have considered this aspect during your initial setup or project initiation. So industry specific risk is also there, and it is important one. Now there is another category of risk which is called the market risk, and it is because of unanticipated changes in macroeconomic factors. So different macroeconomic factors like GDP growth rate, interest rate, and inflation, they fluctuate, they change over a period of time, and because they might change in unanticipated ways, so accordingly your market will also get affected, or is likely to get affected. So it involves risk uncertainty. uh, this is what is categorized as market risk. And in case you are an international player, you are having international projects, then you would be dealing in foreign exchange, and often because of foreign exchange fluctuations or political maybe instability in the involved countries, uh, there might be a risk which is known as the international risk. So there are multiple sources of risk involved, and we need to take a look and understand so that we can manage them effectively. Now if we see the project planning phase, it consists of several steps, 10 steps in particular. And project planning phase is dealing with the creating of planning documents to guide the project management team throughout the project delivery. And as we can see in it, the creation of a risk plan is an important or integral part of the project planning phases. So typically it begins with creating of a project plan, then what resource requirement, the resource plan is there, financial requirements, financial plan is there, quality plan is there, then risk plan is there, then how to get an acceptance from the various stakeholders, that also involves planning. How you communicate with the involved stakeholders, that is another element which comes under the creation of a communication plan. You procure the various resources, so procurement plan is also there. You, for some of the aspects, you might outsource, so contracting, or you are procuring some raw materials from outside, from suppliers, so contracting with the suppliers that is also a part of the planning phase, and the review of planning phase or performing phase review is also there. And in this exercise of project planning, creating a risk plan is also an integral part. Now, how do we go about creating a risk plan? So basically, a risk plan will deal with identifying risk and implementing a plan to reduce it. This risk plan helps in monitoring and controlling risk effectively, and this effective monitoring and control eventually results in increased chances of your project success. These are the 10 steps which are involved in a risk plan typically. So you define first the risk management as in the context of that particular project. Then you identify the different categories of risk which are relevant to your project. After that, you list the different types of risk which might occur in the context of your project um, life cycle, and then associated with the different types of risk, you estimate the likelihood, or the how much is the chance of occurrence of these risks. Now, based on the type and the chance of risk, you calculate the impact, that what impact these risks can have on your project. Then you prioritize or rank the identified risk as above, so that you can know which risk is the most critical or most detrimental or most challenging. So you assign priorities to the different types of risks involved, and then based on the identification or prioritization of risk, you identify what actions you will be taking to prevent the occurrence of such risks. There also need to be that despite prevention, trying to prevent the risk, if in case the risks do occur, or the challenges posed by risks do occur, then how you will tackle them. So you will need to list the contingency actions to be taken in case the event or the risk happens. So then subsequently you create a risk schedule which deals with allocating of time frames to different kind of actions for risk which you have planned, and then you implement a process to monitor and control risks throughout the project life cycle. Now, earlier we had talked about some of the prominent measures of risk, like the range, the standard deviation, and semi-variance and variance. Through an example, let's try to develop a better understanding about that. So this there is this example given for a capital investment. For a project, you require some capital investment, and the analysis often is done through the net present value approach, like how much is the NPV of a particular project. So there are three kind of scenarios or scenarios discussed. Where is the project which is being executed because of varying or varied type of risk might have uncertainty in the NPV value. So cash flows might be uncertain. So in one scenario, say for example, the NPV is 200, and that scenario has a probability of 0.3. Then in another scenario, depending on the cash flows, the NPV value of the project comes out to be 600, and it has got the probability of 0.5. So, and in another case, another scenario, 900 is the NPV value of the project, and the probability associated with this value is this value of NPV is 0.2. Now, based on the information, this information given, we often go about. So you can relate to the PERT example, program evaluation and review technique examples in network diagram which you have said. So in which we study about the concepts of optimistic time for a project, pessimistic time, or the most likely. So you can associate this the different three scenarios with that also. So in case your project gets executed in a very optimistic way, then its NP value is 900 and the project probability associated is 0.2, and the most likely cases of NP value of project to be 600 with the associated value of probability of 0.5, and the pessimistic case has the NPV value of project as 200 and with the probability of 0.3. So first, as a measure, we calculate the probability weighted NPV value. So it is the weighted mean of all the NPV values basically, and it is got by multiplying the corresponding value of NPV with the corresponding value of probability. So if we sum these values, we get what is known as the probability weighted NPV or the weighted mean. So 200 into 0.3 plus 600 into 0.5 plus 900 into 0.2. If we perform this, we get the weighted mean or the probability weighted NPV value of the project as 540. Now this is taken to be like a weighted mean of the project. Now the range is given by the difference between the highest value and the lowest value. So in this case, the highest value of NPV is 900 and the lowest value is 200. So 900 minus 200 gives you 700. So range of this NPV values is 700. For standard deviation, which is represented by the symbol sigma, what we do is we sum up the products of the probability value with the corresponding values of the difference between the NPV values and the weighted mean value of NPV. We square them, square this difference, multiply it by the PI, and then take the square root of this. So essentially what we are doing is our weighted mean is 540. So each of these values difference will take 200 minus 540, 600 minus 540, 900 minus 540. So this difference, will square this difference, 200 minus 540 square, multiplied by the corresponding probability, plus next NP value difference between 540 and 600, square it, multiply by 0.5, that is the corresponding probability value, and then also do the same thing with the third NP value, which is 900. So 540 minus 900 whole square, multiply by the corresponding probability of 0.2 and take under root. If we sum all these values, we get what is called as the standard deviation of this. So what we are doing is basically we are taking the square root of the summation of all the probability values and the difference squares. So difference between the NPV value and the expected probability weighted NPV value. So differences we take, we multiply the square of those differences with the corresponding probability values, sum them up, and then take the final under root to get the value of the standard deviation. So in this case it comes out to be 249.8. Now variance is given by the square of standard deviation. So sigma square, which is the sum square of this particular value, it is equal to 62400 for this particular example. Now continuing more measures for measuring risk, we have the measure called coefficient of variation, or CV in short, which is nothing but the ratio of the standard deviation, that is sigma, to the expected value, which is the weighted mean x bar. So in this case we have already calculated the standard deviation. So standard deviation is 249.8 and the expected value or the weighted mean is 540. So if we take the ratio of these two, 249.8 by 540, we get the value of 0.46. So the coefficient of variation is 0.46 for this particular project example. Now semi variance is another measure, and it is similar to variance except for the fact that it takes only those value of project NPV which are less than it considers only those values which are less than the expected value. So expected value we have calculated previously is 540. So we will take the differences in the formula of variance for only those values which are less than 540. So 200 is less than 540. So we take the difference, in this case 200 minus 540, and then square it and multiply by the corresponding probability. The values of 600 900 are more than 540, so we do not consider them in semi variance. So only those values which are less, NPV values which are less than the expected value or the weighted mean are taken, and their difference from the weighted mean those NP values is taken, squared, multiplied by the corresponding probability, and we get the semi-variance as a measure of risk. Now after the planning phase, the third phase is the execution phase in a project management life cycle. So there is a management process used to monitor and control risk during the project execution phase also. So basically there are three types of three tools or techniques which are used. First is the risk management process. This is defined. So it is nothing but it basically describes the steps required to perform risk management within the particular project. Now for this, what we do is we identify the different risks and takes actions to minimize that this risk can be prevented. So we minimize the occurrence of these risks. And typically for a risk management process, the following 5 steps are involved. Like first, we identify the critical and non-critical risks. Then we document each risk in depth by completing a risk form. And then we also create a log or record of all risks and notifying the management of their severity, how much severe these risks are. Then we take different actions to reduce the likelihood or occurrence of these risks, and we try to reduce the impact of the risk on the project by following what are the best management practices available for such kind of risk management. So we adopt them to minimize the impact in case the risk does occur. Now there are the two records or forms like risk form and risk register which are maintained. Now risk form is used to manage risks within a particular project, and this enables entering the risk form enables entering all of the information related to a risk. Now we have listing of various actions to be taken to prevent risk from happening, and for this we will be typically recording the parts of the project that have some identified risk. Then we'll also list or record the nature of risk involved, in which and which part of the project are likely to be affected by those types of risks. And we assess the likelihood, what is the probability of occurrence of the risk, and then finally we get the impact of that particular risk on a project assess. So typically, as we in the previous example see that NPV is multiplied by the probability, so we get the typical value. So similarly, the risk, how much probability it has of happening, and associate that how much impact it can have on that, on a particular project, that is assessed. Now there is another tool which is the risk register, which is also used, and it is used to track all risks within a particular project. Now what we do in the risk register is we record the current status of each risks which we have identified previously. Then we take the necessary actions to reduce the occurrence or likelihood of occurrence of those kind of risks. And in the risk register we will be having some records like the type of risk, who raised it, and how it could be affecting our business. Then we record the likelihood of occurrence of that risk and the potential impact of that risk on a project. Then we also record the risk priority based on its effect on the project. So the more impact a particular risk has, it will be assigned a higher priority compared to the other risk which impacts to a lower extent. Now what actions we will be taking to prevent the occurrence of such risks which you have identified, so that also is recorded in a risk register. And then various contingency action plan is also recorded in case the risk does happen or occur. So since it involves uncertainty, so we are not sure whether the risk will happen or not, but in case it does happen, then what action will be taking. So that contingency plans is also recorded in the risk register. So this was all about the basics of risk and risk management. So in this session we talked about first the concept about the concept of risk, then how it is important, how it is prevalent, or it is unavoidable in almost all decision takings and more so in projects. We talked about the creation of a risk plan as an integral part of project planning. Then how we talked about how a risk plan is created for a particular project or organization. We talked about different measures, so through an example how different measures are calculated, worked out for a particular project. And we also take a look at the different techniques during the project execution phase for monitoring and control of risk, typically the risk management process, risk form and risk registers. With this we conclude this session. Thank you for being a patient listener.